Welcome everybody to the second of our talks this morning. I'm Jamie McCall from PLB and I'm chairing today's talks. PLB are one of the show sponsors and we've been working in the sector for the last 30 years. We're really proud to be helping with these, and if you have any feedback at all, please could you email the show at info@museumsandheritage.com or come and tell me anything at the end of the session. We'll have some time for questions at the end and I'll pass around the mic for you to ask anything. And please remember the sessions are being recorded and so they will be made available to you shortly after the show is finished. So on to our talk, Monetising Online Audiences, the Future of Fundraising. This is Nick Wyness, Head of Marketing and Engagement, who's come all the way from the Tank Museum in Bovington.
That's great. Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming to listen today. And what you're seeing on the screen there isn't 100% relevant. It's actually a photograph that we use for selling our Tank Museum Christmas jumpers. But I always think when I look at that photograph, it looks like one of those dreadful 70s folk album LPs. So I hope you weren't unduly put off by that. So yes, my name is Nick Wyness. I'm Head of Marketing and Engagement at the Tank Museum in Dorset. And I'm going to be talking about how we have developed a significant new income stream through the careful cultivation of our online audiences using social media platforms, YouTube in particular. And what I think makes us unique is that our online activities, specifically our content generation, is profitable. And it's now making a real contribution to the financial sustainability of the Tank Museum. So I'm going to walk you through what could potentially become the industry standard for achieving reach and raising funds in the 21st century. So at the Tank Museum in rural Dorset, hopefully some of you may have been. Hands up if you have. Fantastic, excellent choices all around. If you haven't, well, you can get a good flavour of what we're doing online on our YouTube channel. We tell the story of the tank and the people that served in them. With over 300 examples, it's home to the world's finest and most historically significant collection of tanks. So you can get a good experience of what the Tank Museum is actually like by having a look at our YouTube channel. In 2021, the Tank Museum YouTube channel clocked up 20 million views in a year and hit 400,000 subscribers across our other social media platforms. We organically reached an additional 70 million people. Now, these numbers are impressive in themselves for what is a rural Dorset museum. But on top of this, we were able to generate 25% of our total £6 million turnover online in 2021. In 2019, it was just 5%. So how did we do it? Well, I think an important part of how we've been able to achieve this success has got a good deal to do with how the Tank Museum is actually structured. Marketing is a standalone function at the Tank Museum rather than an offshoot of commercial or audience development, as it is sometimes in other organisations. Social media has been in the ownership of the marketing team at a strategic level for over a decade now. Whereas in different organisations it might sit within different teams at different levels. In some it might sit with commercial teams, in others it might sit with comm teams, but at tactical level, or with public programmes or outreach teams. And obviously where it sits has a fundamental impact on how it's positioned and how it's presented, because of course all these different teams will have different agendas. Now, I've always believed that social media should be an extension of our public relations activity. It's about storytelling in a way which grabs the attention in order to make the organisation quite simply more famous. And obviously being in rural Dorset, that's a really important thing for us. We've used social media to build our brand strategically rather than to achieve short-term goals. And in doing so, we're now able to demonstrate a much better return on investment. I think this is the point of difference between ourselves, our online development, in comparison with national organisations that are arguably bigger than our own. So the use of social media should of course be underpinned by a content strategy. The objectives of our content strategy have been brand building, so creating brand awareness and a brand voice, generating leads, sending traffic to our website, generating visits and collecting emails, and building advocacy, which is all about building an audience, creating a community, and developing loyalty amongst that audience. And this, of course, is the really important bit. Now, these objectives can only be fulfilled by creating content which is useful, as in it satisfies a need the audiences are seeking, so it's not just about sales messages or stories that are of no interest to that particular audience. It should be authoritative and accurate, so it needs to be interesting and based in fact and on brand. Of course, as museums being authoritative is something which should come naturally to us, but it really does have to be accurate. It needs to be original, so not ripped off from other sites or other creators. And it needs to be simple, as in easy to understand, easy to digest, concise, and of course, because we're museums and we have relatively limited resources, it needs to be easy to produce. And it also needs to be consistent, so delivered regularly in a channel-appropriate format, because of course all these different social media platforms have very different conventions. Now, what we found, unsurprisingly, was that in doing this, the audience we created on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube was composed very much of tank enthusiasts, tank aficionados, or tank nerds, just like me. What was interesting was just how different the online audience is compared to the on-site audience. And that was a good thing, because that means that we've really found a niche online. So let's have a look at the Tank Museum's YouTube audience. What emerges is a very different picture to that of our traditional museum visitor profile. Our audience online is overwhelmingly male, but this compares with around 55% of museum visitors. 60% are under 44, and that's a much younger average age than the average museum visitor. And of those 20 million viewers, 30% are in the USA, with just 21% from the UK. Museum visitors are, of course, overwhelmingly UK-based, probably about 90%, with less than 2%, maybe even only 1% being from the USA. And understanding these differences is crucial, because you can immediately see the importance of communicating with the audience differently than you would with the audience that's coming in through your doors. So what is the point? It's a question I ask myself every morning. But until 2018, our objective was simply about growing the audience, because of course big numbers equal success on social media, right? There are clearly marketing benefits in having amassed these large audiences, but like most PR, it's relatively intangible and sort of difficult to justify and demonstrate. Our YouTube audience was growing, and it was reaching people that we could never have hoped to reach in the days and years beforehand. But growth creates more demand, and sustaining weekly output on YouTube, however you're doing it, really isn't all that cheap. So if the whole point of investing time and resource into YouTube was so that more people would come and visit, what was the value to the Tank Museum of viewers outside the UK? Or what was the point of reaching viewers on YouTube who were unlikely to ever visit due to their geographically remote location? And then it suddenly dawned on me that growing audiences was only half of the job. If the audience wasn't self-funding in some way, it was never going to be sustainable. Now, there weren't any obvious examples in our sector, so for inspiration, I was looking at content creators, independent content creators on YouTube who were making a comfortable living from doing what they were doing. And I figured if they could do it, so could we. So there are 4 key ways that YouTubers in particular are monetizing their channels. Firstly, advertising revenue. Secondly is merchandise sales. Third is from memberships. And 4th is sponsorships. And I'm going to look at each of these in turn and demonstrate to you how we've made them work for us. So, advertising revenue. So YouTube shares a part of the advertising revenue the platform generates with its creators. So if you subscribe to the YouTube Partner Program, this can become a passive income. The amount you will earn will vary as a result of 2 key factors. The first, of course, is the size of your audience. The more views you get, the more you are likely to earn. But not every view of your content will carry an advert. In 2021, 56% of our views carried an ad, so just over half of our views earned us money. Our RPM was £4.20, so for every 1,000 views, we earned £4.20 in 2021. So with 20 million views across the year, we earned over £84,000 into our bank account from advertising revenue alone, which, for us is not an immaterial sum of money. So the lesson you learn here is that you can earn a very healthy revenue from YouTube advertising, but of course you have to be popular enough to actually attract that audience in the first place. But then, I guess, if no one's watching, what's the point of making that content in the first place anyway? The second factor that can determine how much you can earn from YouTube advertising is the attractiveness of your audience to advertisers. And this is impacted, of course, by the demography of your audience, and will vary seasonally depending on the spending patterns of the advertisers who are looking to target those individuals. So, for example, 32% of our advertising revenue was earned during November and December, which is, of course, a very busy time for the advertising market. And geography plays an important part in this too, which is also quite surprising. The YouTube ad market is actually far more developed in the US than it is in the UK. So even though the US viewers contributed 30% of our views in 2021, they contributed 45% of the advertising revenue, whereas the UK audience delivered 20% of our views and just 23% of the ad revenue. And as I'm sure Richard Curtis has already observed, it really does pay to pander to the American audience. The next thing is merchandise sales. Our online audience has driven a significant rise in e-commerce over the past 2 years, representing the largest slice of our gross online earnings. When we launched our online shop in 2017, our merchandising decisions were strictly to appeal to our online audience, rather than reflect every item that we sold in our on-site shop. So we weren't selling the souvenirs and the rock and the kind of thing that you might expect to buy in a museum souvenir shop in Dorset, but we went heavy into books and models and apparel. We pushed the online shop and our content through product placement within our videos, making it clear that a purchase from us was supporting our work and also helping support the channel and the creation of the content. In 2021, the proportion of overseas orders was 20%, but it had been as high as 35% before the new post-Brexit rules came into force in early 2021, which has really sadly had a very negative impact on the amount that we're able to sell to the overseas market, the EU in particular. Using the YouTube merch shelf, which you can see just at the bottom of the screen there below one of our videos, we can promote products that are 100% appropriate to our product. So you can see a video that we've put up there about one of the vehicles in our collection called the Jag Panther, and below that you can see that we've sort of listed a bunch of products which are Jag Panther models and Jag Panther books, etc., etc. So it's very relative. And you can also see the impact that this has had on the sales on a medium which isn't specifically pushing and advertising the products like Facebook is designed to do. Another example of how we've turned this online audience into a straight business opportunity was the string of crowd-funded publications that we launched in 2021. This one for the Panther Bible, which was a facsimile of a World War II tank operator's manual, which we had translated into English for the first time. Our crowdfunding target was smashed with just over 1,000 copies ordered at £35 in just over 2 days. In total, we ran 4 crowdfunding campaigns to republish out-of-print titles that we had the rights to publish, and we earned almost £150,000 to do that. Now, we could never have attempted to do that if we were, of course, just relying on our on-sign shop and the throughput of our regular visitors for those orders alone. The next thing is memberships. Now, museums have run successful membership schemes for years, and like many still do, we still have a friend scheme. A membership scheme is, of course, basically just a fixed payment in exchange for benefits. Now, thanks to Patreon.com, we have a platform that allows us to run a modern membership scheme. Patreon allows you to create multiple tiers of membership at different price points, so you can offer different perks or rewards in exchange for monthly supporter payments. We offered rewards we knew we could easily and inexpensively fulfill at price points that provided a spread of options. Having set ourselves up, we needed to tell our would-be Patreons where to find us. And this meant regularly signposting it in our YouTube content and on our other social media platforms. So every YouTube video we produce has a plea to support us on Patreon with the message that the income would help us keep the channel going and help it continue to improve. And of course, this is a much easier ask if you are a charity like we are. We also thanked our new supporters publicly on Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms, and this obviously helped raise awareness of the platform as well. And there you can see an example of some of the tiers of membership that we've actually got, utilizing military ranks and the price points that we've got there as well. So in 2021, we earned £82,000 from Patreon. And it's been steadily growing since we launched it in 2017, which when we earned £16,000 in our first year of operation. But Patreon isn't perfect. It was clearly designed for individual content creators and isn't really designed to cater to the provincial British registered charity. There's no gift aid option, and the patrons cut has actually increased for new members. And of course, there are currency conversion fees and money translation fees and that kind of stuff on top of that. But these costs aren't completely out of kilter with similar platforms like Just Giving. And of course, for this purpose, it's by far and away the most appropriate tool for the job. And Patreon remains by far and away our most successful regular giving scheme ever. There are, of course, new alternatives arriving all the time. YouTube has just launched its own new membership scheme, and it's also launched a mechanism where viewers can give you a tip, if you like, on a video-for-video basis. And we'll be looking to exploit these in a bit more detail in the future. But if you look at where our Patreons are based around the world, you'll see just how important the overseas audience is to us as a source of funding. And thanks to the reach and popularity of our content, we're benefiting financially from audiences that we can never have hoped to reach 10 or 15 years ago. And that's why our online activity has become such an important part of our current fundraising activity. Sponsorships. So anyone who regularly watches YouTube will have seen creators plugging products or services during their videos. These arrangements tend to come about when a brand makes a direct contact with a YouTube channel and makes a cash offer to include some kind of product endorsement in their video. Working with sponsors is something that we've also tried, excepting that we're also tacitly endorsing the product, which of course carries an element of risk. One of the sponsors we work with probably the most is World of Tanks, which is a massively multiplayer online video game played by literally millions of people worldwide. And what you can see on the screen there on the left-hand side is a graphic of one of our actual exhibits in the game. You can see a photograph of our actual exhibit on the right-hand side. So I'd say the graphics were actually really rather good. Now, World of Tanks has sponsored events and exhibitions for us in recent years, so it's not much more of a leap for them to be sponsoring our online content as well. And they've done this in two ways. The first way is the kind of more traditional flat sponsorship with a fixed fee per video, and also in an affiliate arrangement. And an affiliate arrangement doesn't normally include an upfront payment from a partner. Rather, the affiliate, us in this case, gets paid for every new customer that they refer to the sponsor. So when we promote a particular promotional code and link, for example, in our content, we get paid a bounty for every new player that creates an account and downloads the game. And that's the sign-up screen that we're currently running with World of Tanks there. And as you can see, the messaging is constructed to make it clear to the user that by doing this, they're actually going to be helping support the Tank Museum, helping our work and supporting the channel. But also, as an international video games company, World of Tanks has helped us reach new audiences themselves. Their support for our Tankfest Online event, which took place in June of 2020, which was a live-streamed event to replace our kind of biggest annual fundraiser, allowed us to raise over £50,000 of donations from World of Tanks players. And this added to the £20,000 worth of additional sales we achieved in our online shop and the £20,000 that they provided to help us put the event on. So in summary, what we've talked about here is ensuring that we went into this with a strategy that we felt was sustainable, that we had clearly defined content goals, that we'd identified and worked within a niche and maximized the available opportunities. But I think what this shows, what our experience shows, is that there really is a huge opportunity for all museums and cultural organizations to be leveraging online audiences. And I think most organizations have yet to really realize this and harness it. And it's a really exciting opportunity as well, as you can see. It's making a real difference to the way we're going about our work. Because the way we've also done it is organically and in-house, which means we've never made a large or significant financial investment up front in making any of this work. It's all been done with our own staff and our own teams. And we also, based on the success, have now bigger plans to continue developing the way in which we're creating content online and the audiences that we're creating it for, because we think we can expand a lot more on the success we've seen here by targeting slightly different audiences. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention. That brings me to the end of the presentation. My name's Nick Wyness. I'm from the Tank Museum, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
A brilliant talk. Thank you, Nick. I'm sure there'll be some questions. Anybody want to put a hand up?
Hi Nick, that was a brilliant presentation and quite staggering numbers that you're showing there. You briefly touched upon at the end there. What I would like to ask in a wee bit more detail is what's next then? What is next for you guys? Would you look at things like moving into the metaverse, for example? Do you see that as an opportunity for online sales?
I mean, what I've sort of seen in working in this sphere for, I don't know, 10 years or so now, is that things always change. And actually, what works for us today might not work for us tomorrow. And what works for us today definitely won't work for us in 3 or 4 years' time. So we always have to be evolving. Specifically, what we're doing, we're looking at doing now is kind of branching out onto other platforms that exist. You've probably all heard of TikTok, for example. It's not really aimed at people of my great age. And yet there's an audience on there. So we need to be creating content to find people who are enthusiastic about the same kind of stuff who won't necessarily be being well served on that platform. So for us, it's all about looking at the audience we've got, looking at the audiences we haven't got, and seeing how we can use different platforms or different content delivery devices, as in second YouTube channels, for example, if that's what it comes to basically broaden our audiences. But it all comes back to us about being sustainable. So it has to achieve a financial objective, as well as the objective of reach and just being a better charity for getting your stories out there. In terms of the metaverse, sure, I'm sure we'll get to that in the future, but down in Dorset, we've only just got the internet, so.
Okay, there was another one at the front here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. So just to echo that, it's fantastic figures. And well done, congratulations, tremendous work. The question I wanted to ask you was, you're using the Patreon platform for the membership scheme. Is there any reason why you particularly haven't used a client relationship management software and managed the memberships yourselves to avoid those heavy fees and everything else?
It was basically because what we were specifically looking to imitate was platforms that YouTube audiences were comfortable using. So Patreon was something that was kind of being widely sort of pumped at the time by YouTube. They kind of had an agreement with Patreon, and a lot of other YouTube creators were using it relatively successfully. So for us, it was about using a platform that we thought Americans in particular would be quite happy and conversant to exchange their money on. And that's basically all it was. It was just about, this is what the sort of YouTube community seems to be using. We should do the same thing.
Okay, so because the Patreon brand in itself links well with your brand as well.
Yeah, that familiarity.
Yeah, okay. And it also means less membership management, I suppose, in terms of if you're running your own software and your own management membership database, then it's a lot more work and a lot more money.
Yeah, so we also run a friend scheme sort of side by side. So it is a bit of duplication of data, but again, this is all about making it as easy as possible to our potential supporters, and not necessarily using platforms that they would never have heard of, because of course then there's that whole, particularly when it's online, there's that whole trust issue as well.
Thank you very much. There was one down over here first, I think. There you are.
Hi there, thank you. You mentioned at the end that a lot of this is done in-house. How big a team do you have to create this much content, and has the team grown since your channel has grown?
Yeah, so we've got a much bigger team now than we did back then, because we've been able to argue for that cash because we've been earning it ourselves. But when we started, it was literally just one guy, one camera, who had been a volunteer, self-taught. He was a photographer, but self-taught how to edit and light and that kind of thing. And so it was a very kind of organic growth. And if you look at our channel, go back to the first videos that we were posting, they are rubbish. But but some of them have actually got, up to 1 million views. So, we've been doing this for quite a while now. But as a result of the fact that we've been able to sort of grow, I mean, actually one of the things that we did on Patreon for a time was actually kind of the messaging behind asking people to support us on Patreon was the fact that if they supported us, we were going to be able to take on an intern from the Arts University Bournemouth, a film graduate, to come and work in our team as an intern. And so for the last sort of 4 years, we've actually been using that Patreon money specifically to fund an intern post. So yeah, working with local universities, I'm a really big fan of. Museums, I think, offer great opportunities for storytelling, and filmmakers and people in sort of in the creative industries, or looking to get a break in the creative industries. So the important thing for us, though, has always been that we have got in our curatorial team a couple of really good natural communicators. So people who are quite happy to stand in front of the camera and basically just talk about the stuff that they're really passionate about. And that kind of authenticity is absolutely key, or it has been really key for us in terms of building an audience, because the viewer has a real relationship with the presenters, and that's really important.
Thank you. There was another one here.
It was basically the same question about time.
Were there any more?
Before you embarked on this approach, did you have an idea and an understanding of your international audiences, or did they kind of evolve as you went along?
So we had a feeling that we'd find them. It was more a surprise than anything else, because I guess, being in, like I keep saying, in rural Dorset, you kind of, you don't think anyone, we can barely get people to pay attention to us outside of Dorset, let alone overseas. So, but it's one of those things, like aeroplanes, like trains, subjects like tanks, they tend to have these little kind of like niche enthusiast communities. And actually working with companies like World of Tanks, who obviously showed that there really was kind of this big global appetite and enthusiasm for exactly the kind of stuff that we had in our museum, really encouraged us to go out and get those overseas audiences. The key thing, I guess, for us, again, though, was about making it worth our while from a charitable perspective. We had to be achieving some kind of goal by reaching those audiences. But it was very much an organic process.
Okay, thank you. Any more? There's one over here.
Hi, I suppose I had a question, because you obviously clearly identified your passionate audience, the people who call the tank nerds, but obviously there are large numbers of people out there who don't know the terminology or the history of specific tanks. I wonder how much you're trying to attract those people, more than novice, who might remain a novice or might eventually accumulate enough information to become a tank nerd. What do you strategize bringing those into the museum via social, and how do you envisage doing that? And do you intend on keeping them or upgrading their kind of knowledge, as it were?
That's a really interesting question, because you get thinking about kind of like, the funnel idea. So our online audiences, we know that these are kind of like the gilt-edged tank enthusiasts, and they're out there, they love tanks. We just need to make sure that they find us, and it's quite easy to find them because they're quite easily defined. Their communities exist online, video games and these things that they will coalesce around. But they're very different to the kind of people we're trying to attract to the Tank Museum itself. So it's two completely almost different mindsets in terms of how we're marketing. So in terms of what we're hoping to bring to the museum, it's literally anybody and everybody. And particularly if you happen to be in Dorset, we want you to come and visit the Tank Museum. In terms of our future strategy, how we're going to grow that audience is about kind of just taking this. We've got people who are kind of a niche within niche tank enthusiasts in the niche of military history enthusiasm. And military history is a niche of history as an enthusiasm, and so on and so forth. So for us, it's going to be about, right, okay, well, we've got all the tank nuts. Now we need to go make this more relevant for people with a wider interest in military history. And even within military history, you've got people who are really into World War I and World War II and that kind of thing. So for us, the strategy is always going to be about just pushing that a little bit further, and a little bit more, and just seeing how far we can get and how successful we can be. There are people at the opposite end of the spectrum, though, that will never be interested in what we've got to say. And that's okay, that's fine, because there's millions and millions of people over here who can help us achieve our objectives. And those people are just much more interested in other stuff, and that's absolutely fine as well. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, are there any more questions at all? Right, so before you dash off and go and set up an account on Patreon or your YouTube channel or become a tank nerd, can we thank Nick again? Brilliant.
Thank you all very much.